My name is David Silverman. I'm an intimacy transformation specialist and erotic blueprint coach, and I'm passionate about consent as a way of life and religion. Um, and I'm super happy to talk to anybody about it who will listen.
Mm.
So, forgiveness, particularly in the context of intimate relationships, is a pretty big topic, and there's a lot to think about and consider, and in general. But the main thing that I wanted to bring to the table for consideration and to talk about is sort of the use of the phrase and the of "I'm sorry" and apologies in general, and what it means and how to use them in a good way. One of the concepts I was introduced to in my own growth process was that oftentimes the use of I forgive you actually creates separation between people, and that's sort of a long explanation of how that works. But how can we use I'm sorry and I forgive you and this reconciliation process to actually connect us and not leave us feeling kind of empty or blank with one another? And the three concepts I want to sort of differentiate between and for people to consider when they're in a process of forgiving one another or being forgiven is the concept of I have a pad of paper here of what it means, like an apology, right? So an apology being like, hey, I'm sorry, and what that really means for us, the concept of absolution, and the concept of forgiveness. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I feel that a lot of the times that when people apologize, people use the phrase "I'm sorry" to do a lot of different things, like as a different way of maneuvering in a conversation, right? Sometimes when people say "I'm sorry," they mean I'm acknowledging that I witnessed you just went through something. Sometimes when they say "I'm sorry," they mean, oh, I just did something, I hurt you, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry I hurt you. And sometimes they mean I'm sorry, which is really a kind of passive aggressive, I want you to let it go now, right? Right. And that can come in a lot of flavors, right? But people say I'm sorry many different ways. And there's sometimes I'm sorry feels super good. And sometimes I'm sorry doesn't feel good to hear, right? And I think it's worthy of study for everybody. When is it that I'm saying I'm sorry because I want you to absolve me of something? And when is it that I'm saying I'm sorry because I'm genuinely not okay with what I did, right? And the big one for me is when I say I'm sorry and I'm attached to you doing something, then I'm probably not actually sorry, right? Like it's like if I say I'm sorry, but I want you to do something now that I've said it, nah, I probably am just doing it with an agenda. And a lot of the times when couples fight, one person will say, I'm sorry, and the other person will either feel obligated to, or they will do so because mostly because they feel obligated either to that person or to their sense of what it means to be a good person. They'll say, I forgive you. And then they don't feel happy or better. They're not like, oh, thank you. It's like, I forgive you, which really just means I said the thing I'm supposed to say, right? And my experience of that, mostly the problem with it is that it doesn't create reconnection, right? So it's not really forgiveness, right? It's not, I don't forgive you if I say I forgive you, if I'm also still thinking about it. And it comes up the next time we fight. And, it's like, that's not forgiveness, that's absolution, right? It's like, I've absolved you, but actually things aren't better and the scales aren't balanced between us. So I don't want to, there's a lot to be thought of and discussed and worked through, but I just want to sort of present those thoughts of, it's like, here's something for us to all consider and think about. To me, the important draw from those considerations is real forgiveness versus sort of the other thing that we end up doing. Real forgiveness always makes me feel closer to the person. If I'm actually forgiving them, my heart feels closer to them. Even in the case of like, an abusive parent who you can't speak to anymore because they're still abusive. Like, if I've forgiven you in my heart, even if I can't speak to you, I still have a more open heart to that person, right? I'm still like, I still want good things for them. And if they ever stop throwing rocks at me, I would love to see them again, right? That's the way I think of good forgiveness versus forgiveness that's in some ways really about being better than the other person. It's like, I forgive you. You know, like that kind of a thing, right? You know, it's like, is that forgiveness? So I hope that other people have interesting things to say about these concepts, and I can talk more, but I can take up an hour and a half if I don't box myself into something.
Thank you. I'm really curious to hear what the other speakers have to say as well. I really liked how you mentioned the how do we know that when we know it's actually the forgiveness, that it's the heart feels closer there. That embodied feeling means a lot to me. Mm-hmm.
Me too.
Yeah, thank you.
Does anybody have any thoughts? I'd love to hear what other speakers.
Yeah, me too.
We took a moment to define informed consent, but I realized we actually didn't define forgiveness. So I'd love just like even a little soundbite of, David, what you consider forgiveness to be.
Sure. Yeah. For me, one of the reasons I didn't define it because I feel like there's so many different kinds of forgiveness, and the way that it's used, there's ways it's used. Like when we say I forgive you, sometimes it's a social necessity to be like, it's almost like the apology of I'm sorry is I'm sorry, I recognize something went wrong. And the saying I forgive you in some ways isn't the actual end of it. It's the beginning of reconciliation. And so it can be good that way. But for me, I think of forgiveness in three different ways, right? I think of forgiveness between you and other people, which is almost like a particular kind of social dance that has to get done to rebuild and reconnect people. Then I think of forgiveness from an internal place. So it's like in my inner world, forgiving people, meaning not holding on to grudges and not holding on to negativity and that kind of anger. And then I think of what, for me, because I'm a spiritual person, I think of as divine forgiveness, which is the forgiveness that occurs between you, God, I am, presence, all of it. And that's a very deep spiritual study and not something that's super useful to talk about. But it's to me, and there's that includes more religious contexts of forgiveness, right? Which my opinion is one of the reasons forgiveness is a little screwed up in this country is because of the mix-up between those different layers. Right? People often think it's good if I say I forgive you, but then it creates separation.
Mm-hmm. For me, there's a shift that occurs. A forgiveness offers a spaciousness, a shift in the energy, a change in some way. I know if I haven't reached forgiveness, if there doesn't feel like that spaciousness has happened.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. That
Nice.
shift, if there's still that corded in energy with myself or others.